If I could encourage you in anything this morning, sail on. Don't give up yet, but keep on going. Sail on. As I studied, I thought about a 4th of July message. If you hadn't noticed, I'm even wearing my 4th of July tie. But as I studied for that, I felt, I don't know, I felt all over the place. It's just the reality of it. But as I was sitting in Sunday school, the Lord brought a conversation back to my mind. And as Brother Nick sang Living by Faith, it just kind of confirmed it. That the direction we need to go this morning is completely different than what I had planned. But the holiday of Independence Day, what we celebrate on the 4th of July, Thomas Jefferson wrote to his wife Abigail back in 1776 on July 2nd that day for years and years to come would be celebrated in pomp and all these great celebrations of parades and splendor, even going as far as to say it was going to be celebrated with gunshots and illuminations in the sky. I don't know that he knew what it would evolve into by any means. But if you look up what the 4th of July, what the symbol for the 4th of July is, you're going to see a ton of American flags. Amen. Because it's a day that people think back and become patriotic. It's a day that people look at what the sacrifices have been and they're thankful for the freedom that they live in. Church, as much as the 4th of July should mean to us as Americans, and I'm thankful to be an American this morning, I'm thankful for the freedoms that I have, and if you're not, you need to go back and evaluate them again. Because we have great freedoms because we live in this country today. But as thankful as I am for all of that, they can't compare to the patriotism and the thankfulness I have for Jesus Christ and what He did for me.
Amen. Thank the Lord.
Brother Horton preached a message a few years ago at the assembly, which he talked about patriotism. He talked about going into these other countries to minister, and when he would get there, they would be holding their flag and they would be excited and they would be just happy to see him and embrace him, and many times they would even hand him their flag so he could march with them or lead them out of the airport with their country's flag. But he spoke about how that flag didn't do anything for him. Not because he wasn't thankful to be in that country, not because he wasn't glad to be there ministering, but because his alliances did not rest with the country that flag came from. I was able to relate a whole lot more to his message after we took a trip to Mexico a couple years ago. We had a good trip, and I'm not trying to put down Mexico in any way, shape, or form. I enjoyed my time there. But as we flew back into Atlanta and we got to customs, and you walk down that ramp and you see the American flag standing there, there's probably nothing that I've been more excited to see in my life than to be able to get back home where I knew I belonged, where I knew that I was back in my country, on my soil, with the laws that I was familiar with and knew how to conduct myself. Amen. But Brother Horton went on in that message, And he said that while he couldn't get a hold of the patriotism that they had for their country, when they would get to their convention or BTI or whatever it was that they were having, and they'd bring the church flag out, the patriotism that he could have because his allegiance rested with the church. Because he knew what the church stood for. And I was talking with someone here recently about embassies. And if you've ever studied or looked up embassies at all, it doesn't matter where in the world you are. If you find a United States embassy, if you can make it there, as soon as you walk through those doors, you're on American soil again. And it feels like home because there's safety there. Church, wherever we go in this world, if we come along with a church flag, if we get along with the church message, if we see the church of God, we should know that there's safety there because we're home. Now to go back to the conversation that I told you we had. Friday afternoon, or Friday morning, I guess is when it started. We had a storm that just rolled through. And it poured some rain out on us. In fact, we were at headquarters and we got there that morning and it was a little cloudy. But you didn't think too much about it. You knew rain was coming in. We went and had devotions, and I looked out the window after devotion, and I looked at Jordan, and I said, man, I want to just go back to bed. It's nighttime outside. It was so dark, it looked like it was nighttime outside. And in just a few moments, this roof, or the sky just fell apart, it seemed like. And it began pouring rain. We kept on working for a little while and we were all sitting around. We ordered pizza because none of us wanted to leave and get out in the rain. So we made the delivery boy get out in the rain and bring us our pizza. But we ordered some pizza and all of us were sitting around in the office. And Brother Pimentel looked over at Jordan and he asked the question, aren't we supposed to take the flags down when it's raining outside? When there's bad weather, aren't we supposed to remove the flags? And I said, I don't think we are. He thought that we were supposed to fly them at half mast. And I said, no, I don't believe that's it. I believe that if it's an indoor flag, it's not to be outdoors during inclement weather. But that's the only thing there. And he said, well, we'll look it up. And he began to look up Google, because Google knows all. And Google told us that if it's an all-weather flag, it's okay to stay out during the rain. But if it's not an all-weather flag, it's to be removed and brought inside during any inclement weather. And I promise I'm getting to a point here. Just stick with me. We were sitting around and we were talking about this and kind of going back and forth, just all of us sharing ideas and sharing thoughts about things. Of course, finding new regulations and rules that some knew, some didn't along the way, and just looking through them all. But Sarah piped up and said, so the question really becomes, is the all nations flag an all weather flag? And I don't know if it was my mouthing off or the Lord that inspired it or what it was. I'm not going to try to blame Him for it at this point. But before I knew what I was saying, the words, "Well, it's weathered plenty of storms up to this point," came out of my mouth. And Sarah, of course, immediately looked at me and said, "That's going to be a message here before long, isn't it?" Church, we've gone through the storms. We're going through storms now. But it's not time to pack up and give up. It's not time to give in. It's time to keep on going because He's going to get us through the storm. The flag is still flying. It's not given up yet. Well, Brother Christopher, come here just a second, Brother Nick. Hold that if you don't mind. Well, Brother Christopher, what are you talking about? Church, what I want to get across to you this morning, I love the Church of God, and I'm not trying to put her down or diminish her in this message today or in what I'm saying. But what I'm trying to get across is our hope is not in the church itself, but our hope is in the head of the church, the leader of the church. The flag doesn't represent us, but the flag points back to Christ. Everything about this flag points back to Christ. It doesn't point to the general overseer. It doesn't point to the state overseer. It doesn't point to me as the pastor, but it points back to Christ. And as long as we'll hold on to Christ, He's going to get us through the storm, Brother Nick. He's going to keep us going forward. It's weathered this long and it's not given up yet. That song that I referenced, "Sail On, Old Ship of Zion," it says it's been through so many storms. And some passengers jumped overboard. And what? And they drowned. Church, I know this isn't a happy-go-lucky message. It's a heavy message. It's a weighty message. And maybe it's just for me. But I feel like the Lord is trying to tell us this morning, stay on board. Keep going on. Sail on, and you're going to make it. Keep going through the storms. You see a ship that turns off its motor out in the ocean, gets tossed to and fro by the waves. But a ship that keeps on pushing through, it may be a rocky trip, but it keeps pushing through those waves, and it comes out on the other side. Brother Chris made a statement in Sunday school that we don't have faith because the pastor gets up here and preaches about it. If you have faith because I preached about it, let me tell you something. There's somebody out there that's going to come along and tell you the opposite, and your faith will go away real quick. But if your faith is there because Jesus Christ showed it to you, because you experienced it, because you felt it, then it's not so easy for that just to be washed away and thrown by the wayside. So, church, I want to ask you a question this morning. And I want to be very careful in how I word this. Do you have faith that the church is going to make it? Listen, it's a big question. I came across a letter just recently, if you're tired of hearing about the Solemn Assembly, I'm sorry. I truly am. Hopefully here in the next year, I will be studying something else and it won't keep coming up in everything that I preach about. But I came across a letter written by Brother Lofton in 1992. That in that letter he said, for years and years I've preached and I've believed that the Church of God of Prophecy was going to be the church that goes through everything, that faces it all and comes out on the other side and is the perfect bride of Christ. But with what I see now in the Scriptures, as well as what God is revealing to me, I no longer feel that that will be the bride of Christ. That's some big words. Those are some heavy words. But he followed that up and said, my faith in the bride of Christ has not diminished, but merely my faith in the organization has diminished. Church, today, I want to tell you something. Don't lose your faith that God's church is going to be made perfect. He will have a bride without spot or wrinkle. He will. He will carry it on to perfection. Now I want to follow my previous question up with another one. The first question I asked was, do you have faith that the church will make it? That the church will be made perfect? The second question I want to ask is, did you have faith that the church would make it? That the church would be made perfect? Well, Brother Christopher, what are you getting at? You just changed one word. Thank you, Brother Nick. You just changed one word. Yes, I did just change one word. But I changed a whole lot of meaning with that one word. Because I want to explain something to you. When you joined the church, my hope and my prayer is that you didn't join the church because somebody else told you needed to join the church. But my prayer and my hope this morning is the fact that just as we were talking about, Paul and Saul had a zeal. Saul had that zeal to do what he thought was right in persecuting the Christians. That he, when he became Paul, continued on with the same zeal to work for the Lord, to minister, to serve the Lord. I hope you had a zeal when you joined the church. That you had faith that the church was going to be made perfect. Why is that important? Because if some pastor somewhere is what gave you your vision of the church, some other pastor somewhere else can take that vision away. If some man gave you the vision, some other man can take it away from you. But if God revealed it unto you, if God showed it to you, and your faith was in Him, and it was kindled with a zeal to know that what you were joining was going to be the bride of Christ, then it doesn't matter what may come along the way. It doesn't matter the storms that we may go through. Yes, we may face some bumpy rides, some wavy rides, but we know beyond a shadow of a doubt, she's going to make it. Amen. Church, I want to tell you something this morning. Just to clear the air and make sure you realize my head's not buried in the sand somewhere. Well, Brother Christopher, there's this problem. I see it. I know there's problem. But you see, because my vision was given by God, my faith is still, she will be made perfect. Yes, we've got problems. Yes, there are wrinkles. Yes, there are things going on inside of her right now that are not right. But let's just call it what it is and be honest here for a moment. We know that there can be no sin in the kingdom of God. But the reality of it is we know there is sin in the church of God until she's made perfect. Don't believe me? Go back and read BTI books. But it doesn't mean it's time to jump off the ship. Amen. It doesn't mean it's time to give up. Amen. What it does mean is it's time to get back into the presence of God again. I shared with headquarters Friday during my devotion a message that Brother Josh Farthing preached in our revival in January has just really stuck with me and rang out to me over and over and over again. But it was Sunday night of that revival. And if you remember, Brother Josh told everybody in here, think about the problems for just a moment. Think about everything that's a weight on you. Think about everything you've been praying for. Think about all the things that you see wrong. And after he did that, he came back and he said, now enter into the presence of God. And his whole message that night was based on the fact that when we enter into the presence of God, the problems disappear. When we enter into the presence of God, the weights that we're carrying begin to be relieved off of us. When we enter into the presence of God, the healing that we need comes. When we enter into the presence of God, we see Him work and move amongst us. Patrick Henry gave a speech to the Convention of Virginia in 1772. Every person in here is familiar with this speech. Maybe not in its entirety, but if I say the last sentence, every single one of us would know the last sentence of that speech. Patrick Henry spoke to the president of that convention, and he was very plain, he was very blunt. And he said, there's no time for ceremonies. There's no time for playing games. There's no time for waiting to see if peace is going to come. We keep saying peace, peace. The gentlemen around me keep saying that England's going to send peace. Meanwhile, there's the largest militia ever formed sitting outside of New York's harbor waiting to come and attack us. Why else would a militia be there if it were not coming to attack us? You see, those around him were just hoping. They had a hope that Britain would give them peace, would give them their freedom and just let them go and be okay. And let them colonize themselves without a fight. But Patrick Henry had a realization. Church, today, we need to have a realization. The church is not going to be made perfect by us just sitting back and hoping that peace is going to come. But the church is going to be made perfect when we get down on our knees and we begin to fight against the enemy. And we say, I'm taking the fight to the enemy no matter what the cost may be, because I know God will be with me. God will help me. I'm tired of sitting back. I'm tired of watching these things happen. I'm tired of the problems. Peace isn't coming. It's time to fight.
Amen.
He went on. He said the reality of it is the war has already begun. Church, the war has already begun. We don't have to wonder when it's going to start. It's already started. We've just got to step into it and fight. It's time to get our battle clothes on, our armor of God, and fight the battle. Is anybody familiar with this speech yet? Sister Christine knows it. The last sentence. And as soon as I start it, every single one of us in here can finish it. The last sentence of that speech, Patrick Henry stood before this convention and he cried out with exclamation, with excitement, "Give me liberty or give me death." Amen. There was something that took hold of him that he said, if I can't be free, if I can't have the liberties that I know I should have, then I may as well just go ahead and die. Church, today I want to tell you something. We can stand up and we can say, give me liberty or give me death. Because the Scriptures clearly tell us where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. If we'll get back into the Spirit of the Lord and we'll allow Him to move amongst us, we will have life. We will have freedom not to go and sin, not to go and do what we want to do, but we'll have freedom to live in Him and liberty wherewith to stand.
Amen.
But if we don't get into the presence of God, if we don't allow Him to come and move amongst us, the only option is death. It's what's going to come. I've had people come to me, and I'm not trying to drag this out. I told you, I'm trying to cram 3 messages together, so just hang on a little bit longer. I've had people come to me and say, well, Brother Christopher, we're not going to see God move amongst us until this, and this is taken care of. I want to explain something to you this morning. There are things going on inside the church that you and I cannot control. That you and I cannot fix. Well, Brother Christopher, every member counts as one, and they do. Every man has a voice in the General Assembly. You do. But every one of us has not been placed in a position by God and given the authority. Go back to what the definition of power was in our Sunday school this morning. Power is both the ability and the authority. There are things that we do not have the power to fix or control. So, Brother Christopher, what does that mean? It means what you do have the power to fix and control is you. And what we collectively have the power to fix and control is this local church here at Southside. To say we're going to get ourselves under subjection to God and we're going to allow Him to move amongst us. We're going to allow Him to work right here. A long time ago, I was going through some things in my personal life. I was in a church that was dry, that was going through a drought. And I began to cry out to God and I said, God, how long do we have to go through this? How long do we have to feel this? How long does this have to continue? I just don't know if I can keep going any longer. And I went to another minister and was talking with him and began to share some of my heart with him. And I knew there was problems. You see, I could go back to the Bible and point things out that the pastor was doing that was against what the Bible said to do. And I took it to them. They didn't listen to me. Just to be perfectly honest, it caused even more problems. But once again, I did not have the power to fix that situation. I did everything I could, but I didn't have the power to fix it. And I began to blame that pastor and say, well, we'll never be able to get out of this drought until the pastor changes. We'll never be able to get out of this that we're feeling so long as this pastor's here. And I remember the minister that I went to and I talked to and began to share my heart with, they looked back at me. Square in the eyes. And they said, God will not cause His people to starve to death, no matter how corrupt the leaders are over them. Church, I want you to understand something. And I am not pointing this message at any person. Do not take it that way. Anybody that's watching this online, do not think I'm calling anybody out. What I'm merely saying is I see and I realize the problems in the church. But what I also know is God will not cause us to starve to death because of the problems in the church if we'll get our hearts in tune with God. If we'll fall on our knees before God and allow Him to work amongst us. Amen. He will be faithful to us if we are faithful to Him. Amen. Stand with me if you would here this morning. Church, I know this is a heavy message. I realize this is a heavy message, and it's not what I studied. At headquarters, one of the responsibilities that I've had for the past 2 years now is to change out the flags on the flagpole. Brother Chris can attest to the fact that on top of that hill where the wind is always whipping, those flags need to be changed out pretty often. And normally every 3 to 4 months, sometimes a little sooner, sometimes a little longer, we have to go out and change the flags. But what I've noticed is where the wind whips on top of that hill, if we get a bad storm, if we get a lot of wind, I can almost guarantee that when I get back to the office, the American flag is going to be torn and tattered on the edge. Because it's happened over and over and over again, and I've witnessed it. But what I've also witnessed is while the church flag flies right beside of it in the front of the office and right underneath it out by the road, I have to change it many times because it gets faded. But I've never yet brought a church flag in that's been torn. Church, if there's anything I can tell you this morning, if there's anything, if you hadn't realized it yet, we had convention last weekend. You're stuck with me for another year. I'm praying that it's going to be a good year. But if there's anything that I can encourage you this morning, the church may have faded in time. Not because the truth has faded. In fact, it's one of the beautiful things that I found about the flag is the blue is not what ever fades on the flag. The truth stands out longer than any other color. But because of the things going on inside the church, because of the hurt, because of the situations in your life, the church for you may have faded. But the ship's not sunk yet. She's still sailing. Please, please, don't jump overboard. Don't give up. As I said, you're stuck with me for another year. But guess what? At least for the next year, I need you. Here's the third message I was going to preach. Nobody's crying yet, so we'll be all right. Many of you know Brother Joe and Jason Hill. Brother Joe was my pastor for some time. They were both served in the Navy. Brother Joe preached a message one time that has stuck with me, in which he said, the captain of the ship is not the one that steers the ship. Well, that didn't make any sense at all to me. I've never served in the military. I didn't know what he was talking about. I thought he had lost his mind. But he continued to preach. And he said, the commanding officer of that ship, we think of it in terms of captain. But the commanding officer of that ship gives orders to somebody else. And they are the ones that steer the ship. Church, you may look around and say it's not going in the direction it should be. You may be right. But the captain's still on board. There may have been some that have come along and steered her in the wrong direction. But the captain's not given up his authority. And she will be set right. Stay on board. We're going to make it home.
Amen.
Stay on board. I want us to find a place to pray this morning if we could.